And now,
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We begin with Mystic Song by Sri Swami Lalitananda, played and sung by Sri Swami Umananda and Rajneesh.
our song tonight is called O Goddess Lakshmi, Abide in My House. O divine Mother, here I am, cold and hungry in raging sea, in a world of time and space. Give me the cup of immortality. Om Shri Mahalakshmi Namaha. I implore you, Goddess Lakshmi, abide in my house forevermore. We are recording from the ashram of our revered Guru, Pujyatman Sri Swami Jyotirmayananda in Miami, Florida. Today is October the 3rd, 2018, Wednesday evening, and tonight Swamiji will be lecturing on the Yoga Vasistha. This is series 2018, class number 79. And now Pujyatman Sri Swami Jyotirmayananda.
Om Brahmanandam Param Sukhadam Kevalam Jnanam Urtim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasya Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadhi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Triguna-rahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami. Om. Adorations Sadguru, who is Brahman, the giver of supreme bliss, embodiment of pure consciousness, one without a second, vast as the ether, infinite, eternal, beyond the three gunas and their modifications, the supreme preceptor. Yoga Vasistha, Unutpatti Prakarana, section 102. The immutability of the self. We have just concluded the amusing story told to a child. And the child goes on listening to this story even though things are completely irrational, like three princes. Two were never born, one was never conceived. But they go into the world and they find three rivers. Two had no water, third was just dried up. But in the third river they all entered and refreshed themselves. And so forth. We have already finished that story. Seems quite entertaining. But life also is very similar. Quite entertaining. As a child you are playing with the toys. But to grow up, neither your body looks the way it was as you came. And your toys begin to change. You go into different. And you never question, what happened? Who am I? Am I this pocket size or am I the big one? And so many things you go on attaining. And your body goes on doing its own thing. It changes from youth to old age. And I don't want to go on describing further. Keeping that in view, now is given same topic being brought more in a philosophical terminology. Yoga Vasistha said, O Rama, just as a child imagines a ghost in the stump of a tree, in the same way ignorant men imagine a perishable ego self in the Supreme Self and remain caught in the mire of illusion. You must realize these teachings are from very advanced level, and you have to be careful in how you are assimilating it. Careful means you have to understand how to grow to develop that type. Is a whole process of evolution. How to do your karmas, day-to-day duties. When you hear the statement, the whole world is illusion, then throw away the key of your car, then throw away your iPad. Nothing of your practical reality should be disturbed in the tiniest manner. Rather, things that you are not attending to before, now your mind should be more expert in handling the things of this world. The more you understand the world is an illusion, greater is your ability to attend to everything that you have to do. To figure that out, this formula. The more you develop health of body and mind, greater is your affirmation, I am not the body, I am not the mind. Sri Rama asked, O sage, what is this perishable ego self which experiences the sufferings of the world? First, try to understand. It is through your ego you experience pleasure, pain, and overall the general sufferings of the world. And that ego self itself is a constantly changing entity. As a child, you had a different type of ego. Grow up a little, your ego is a little different. Your ego goes on developing a change within itself. And when you sleep, you forget about your ego. Just like you've taken your shoes and throw them away. Ego is slipper, slips away. And it doesn't matter to you. There is no sense of tragedy that all that you have experienced in the world through your mind and ego, and they just move away. Why didn't God keep you cozy with all this? No, all this moves away. And now you don't lose anything. But this is a profound point, needs to be realized. And that's the biggest challenge or biggest project for every soul. In the process of realizing, your soul gains immense glory. And in the history of humanity, when you see glorious personalities, they are the example of the soul that is discovering the illusion of the world and breaking down illusions and realizing its own. So, when we think of Jesus, Buddha, and all great sages and saints, Rama, Krishna, and all the deities, they are the illustrations of the soul that has risen beyond the realms of Maya. And that's the potential in every individual. Your soul is the same capacity as the soul of Buddha, as the soul of King Janaka, the soul of Rama. Soul, all reflected suns, no matter how miserable they may be in different pots. The reality behind every reflected sun is the sun. The reality behind every soul is the absolute self. And that absolute self is the reality. So it's still easier understanding. Think of your dream. In your dream, you have similar experiences. Experiences of pain, sorrow, frustration, fear, joy. And that goes on and on, though there is no basis behind it. Nothing is there. And yet all goes on. Exactly the same, and much more in a profound way, the world experiences. Sri Vasistha replied, O Rama, the self, seen through the veil of ignorance, tinged by the impressions of individuality, falsely imagines the existence of the illusory not self. Just at this stage, let me remind you of 7 points that are called 7 chain of pain. Beginning with pain, why is all this misery? Answer, you are embodied. Who asked you to be embodied? And why are you embodied? Because you have their karmas. And why do karmas work and restrict your soul? Because of raga dvesha. If mind goes on experiencing attachment and hatred, it's like a tree that enjoys only the shaking, not staying firm. That tree is going to be demolished. Or it will break into and grow again. That's a different process. In other words, if you had a type of mentality that remains calm, firmly rooted, I am the divine, or I am in the hands of God, or I am an instrument in the hands of God. There are 3 stages of your moving towards enlightenment. Deha buddhya tu dasoham, turning to the practical world of practical reality. View yourself, you are working to please God, and no question asked. You are a slave, God is the master. But the slave term has become very misunderstood term. So, we may put it another way. You are a baby and God is the mother. You are a child and God is the father. That one aspect, deha buddhya, as long as you deal with the practical world, try to bring that, which is again not one-step movement. Go on with satsanga, japa, yoga exercises, integral yoga, all practice. The more you go on doing it, mind can go on assimilating that point. That I am nimitta matram, I am an instrument. And big things are all being done by God. You just do what comes within your range. Don't worry about all those things. Stay relaxed in a train. Don't carry the baggage on your head. Easily said, but that's not so easy. Mind is very complex. So it requires a lot of satsanga, a lot of good deeds, and so forth. Jiva buddhya tadanshaka. Then you come to another level. Soul within you. From the point of view of the soul, you are a ray of light, and God is all light. But don't feel inferior to God. The ray of light and God has striking similarity. Therefore, grow in the image of God. Feel godly peace, godly joy, godly heart, godly magnanimity, godly compassion. Don't say to yourself, how can I do all that? These miserable people. I ask you to have compassion. Not so. That's the language of your ego, your soul that has fabricated your whole body. And not a single part of your body can you imagine how to fabricate it. Same cosmic intelligence that has fabricated the world, every tree, every flower, every bird, even little squirrels and little sparrows. See how much artistry is there. That God is your soul is related to that God word, that God ray of God. Therefore, your positive thinking should not be dictated by your ego. Because ego, you start thinking positively. But ego says, how can you be so positive? And presents to you many data about the world. You have to figure that out. Godward movement, that's the subtle art of a spiritual process. You are not constantly dictated by your ego, nor discouraged by your ego. In spite of your ego and its affirmations, you sneak into a spiritual movement. If you are doing japa, meditation, and satsanga and so forth, and living your life day by day with certain rhythm, a certain plan, under good guidance, then you begin to discover a divine source behind all your activity. And ultimately you are led to understand Atma Buddhya Tavaiva, that the deepest level, the essential nature within you is absolutely Brahman, nothing other than that. So, let me conclude on this. Pain is due to embodiment. Embodiment is due to karma. Karma is generated because mind swings between raga and dvesha, attachment and hatred. If the mind were to be one-pointed, serene, unshaken, there will be no karma. But let me go further. Why is raga, dvesha, attachment and hatred? Because egoism. Egoism becomes your ruling factor of your personality. And why is egoism? Because a lack of discrimination between the self and the not self. You are a mixture of the sun and the water in which you are reflecting. And why is this non-discrimination? Because of ignorance, avidya, ajnan. So your whole project is to terminate all the 7 points, but they are all linked to, in order not to be embodied, you should be free of your karmas. In order to be free of your karmas, you have to learn to handle pleasant and unpleasant conditions with a balanced mind. In order to have that, you should not possess a sullen ego. You reduce the inflammation. In order to reduce the inflammation of your ego, you have to find a good physician. And that's a discriminative knowledge. And if you have found it, ignorance will be destroyed. That's your root disease, Moola Adhi. And that's the general plan of life for removing pain. Because that's the purpose of life. You may say, but what about happiness? Happiness is not the problem. Removing the dark clouds that shut out the sun. Once you remove it, the sun shines. The sun doesn't require any change in itself. So happiness is your essential nature, boundless happiness. When one understands that one absolute self alone exists, that's the most shocking revelation. Behind all the multiplicity of things, there is only one absolute. Human mind gets so frantic about it. How can it be possible? And yet day by day you are given that experience. The whole dream world comes. Dream world is in no way different from this world you are experiencing. And not a pinpoint of the dream world is real. And yet, think of all the sufferings, all the experiences, all the wanderings. Just like dream problems resolve when you wake up, or resolve when you come to realize it is a dream, even while dream goes on. In the same way, the problems of the soul resolve when you come to realize I am Brahman. That's the awakening of the soul. As well as the realization that the world is just a dream. And losses in your dream world and gains in your dream world, they are not affecting the reality. You are in the same bed. In your dream, you are tossed away from one house to another. But in reality, you are just in the same place. Taking recourse to spiritual enquiry, you will be able to save your intellect from the dashing waves of illusion. The poetic language. Your intellect is constantly dealing with dashing waves of illusion, and you find no time for doing anything else. Take recourse to spiritual enquiry. Learn the art of vichar, how to find a process. Put it in a simple way, how to find time to relax your mind and develop an awareness of what is your deepest need. Your deepest need too is to find fulfillment in yourself. But therefore, where is yourself? Who am I? That's your deepest project. That's the root source of all the stability and all the fulfillment that you can experience in the world. But if that deepest source is not realized, if you don't discover who am I in a profound way, then all that you have attained have no meaning. In reality, you are never in bondage. You are essentially the self. How can the self be brought into a state of bondage? How can you restrict the sun? You can do that for a child. Look, I will bring the sun to you. Put a little jar of water. Better still, bring the moon to you. And the child looks at the eyes of the mother. She can do miracles. And looks into the vessel, and the moon is shining within. A child becomes so excited, mother can do that. Bring the moon into the little, how wonderful. The fact is, what I'm leading to, the moon has not fallen into your jar. It is childish fancy to feel that you can find the moon within the vessel. Put it in a more serious way. The divine self is ananda, absolute joy. But to the kid mind, the happiness can be found in so many things. But you must realize they are all reflections of the absolute joy coming through your mind. The vasanas of your mind, subtle desires, they give you that illusion that objects are the source of your joy. The joy has not fallen into objects. Therefore, you go on moving from one object to another for finding happiness. And accidentally, the happiness term itself is hoppiness. You hop from one to another. In other words, true happiness remains unaltered. And you are looking for happiness in vessels of water. Vessels are here, your bodies, and water is your mind. Every mind has its own way of thinking about happiness and is entertained with the idea that you can find happiness. There are so many things you can attain and be very happy. The message is not that you should become miserable. Try to understand that every happiness you can experience is coming from divine source. So don't become too glued to objects that give you happiness. I will not go into that detail, but this point is to be understood. The bondage, essential nature of your soul, the soul as it is, that soul is absolute self. As long as the self is not realized, so long one must continue to experience the sufferings of the body and mind. All the world experience of misery is through your body and mind. Even if the body is pierced, cut down, slain, disfigured, or destroyed, he who has attained self-realization is not touched by that pain. That's the state of attainment that must come within one's lifetime. I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the ego. I am that am I. Just as when the bellows of a blacksmith are stopped, the all-pervasive air is not affected. Means what we are leading to understand, that giving an old simile of a factory where a blacksmith is working with fire, red-hot iron. Now you wouldn't sit near him, you are nothing but carbon dioxide. You should not start grieving that the air has gone wrong. This blacksmith has blackened the air. No, air has nothing to do with it. Air is untouched by all the smell created in a little factory. Air blows on, throwing away all types of smell. Similarly, your soul, like that all-pervasive air, is not stuck to one particular factory of your body and mind. The body and mind is one little factory, where ego is your blacksmith creating a lot of fire. And your soul is like that air. It moves from one body to another, carries that all the problems of the body, but shakes them off, moves on. Deep down, you are untouched by all these karmic fruits, negative and positive. When the body is destroyed, the self remains unaffected. Whether the flowers wither or perish, how can their all pervasive fragrance be affected. That relates to, in the spring season, you see fragrance in the atmosphere. And then your eyes go into, that flower has given fragrance. And before your very eyes, the flower drops. And then you become worried. What will happen? This was giving all the fragrance, and it is realize the spring season has not gone. The all-pervasive fragrance of the spring is untouched. It's an allegorical story, allegorical pictures. Let the lotus of the body be affected by the frost of pleasure and pain. But how can the black bee of the soul that soars in the sky be affected thereby? Let this body fall or stand, your essential nature is never untouched, is ever untouched. O Rama, this world is of the nature of the mind. And mind is caused by the beginningless illusory power of Maya. This simple point is very difficult to understand for the masses. Whenever you talk of the world, and you talk of the world in two ways, macrocosm, microcosm. Macrocosm, Brahmanda. The whole Brahma comes into a little anda. Anda is egg. Microcosm, the same Brahman, this now called the self. The self is confined to body, mind, shells, like within an egg. Who creates this type of imagery? Your own mind. This mind within has put two fingers. One is studying the whole universe as macro. Another is studying yourself as, first is macro, another is micro. All this is a play of mind. Unmind yourself. Manonash. The self, which is a substratum and controller of Maya, is far greater than the mind. The screen is far greater than all the world, all the projections that are cast upon the screen. Mind creates the projections. But the screen that gives value to your projections is far greater than all projections. The self gives value to all your mental projections. And that self, that awareness that brings to you the awareness of pain, awareness of pleasure, awareness of mortality, awareness of misery. Behind all that, what's the common denominator? Awareness. That awareness is like a lake, like a big mirror. And the mind is creating all those reflections. From very advanced point of view, that type of imagery becomes easily understood if you continue your practice of enquiry and integral yoga. The mind is not destroyed by the destruction of the body. How can the self be destroyed? Two stages of knowledge. One, if you have not attained enlightenment, body's death is not your death. You move from one body to another. As jiva, individual soul, you are a ray of God. You are a reflected self. So, just like bodies, though bodies are destroyed, your mind continues. And when a mind is destroyed, self becomes the reality. Let me make it more easy to understand. When a person dies, soul that is not enlightened, known as jiva, the soul moves with 8 factors called puryashtaka. Puri means city. City made of 8 constituents. And what are they? First point, tanmatras. Tanmatras are the subtlest elements emanating from Brahman. Second, antahakarana, the 4-aspected mind, unconscious, chitta, ahamkara, ego, buddhi, intellect, and conscious mind, manas, mana, buddhi, chitta, ahamkar. All together is called antahakarana. Third point, the pranas, 5 vital forces. Fourth, senses of perception. And those vital forces that move your organs of action, they are called karmendriyas. Senses of perception, organs of action, karmas, your vasanas, and ignorance. To repeat the terminology, tanamatra, antahakarana, prana, jnanendriya, karmendriya, karma, kama, avidya, all these 8 together is called puryashtaka. So the body is gone. To the world seems everything is finished. No, the soul has a whole city with 8 compartments. And body after body will come and go, but puryashtaka continues. Only when the soul is enlightened, liberated, then you are no longer in the puryashtaka, in a city that leads you to cycle of birth and death. O Rama, death is nothing but a change in the pattern of time and space. This point is not easily understood. People write on birth, death, and reincarnation, and their writings always follow a simple reasoning of time and space. But the reality is totally different. Example, your dream. Your dream does not obey or is not in accord with your concept of time and space. What your practical time and space you have in your dream, your mind evolves time-space illusion. And led by karma, what time-space you are experiencing is illusion. Time-space is being experienced through human mind. And even there is another illusion, another aspect. For all human beings, there is a certain standard of time-space. And without it, your practical realities will not be in order. Everything that you do, there is a time, there is space all over the world. But your psychological experience of time and space is totally different. One person lives through the whole day, feels so happy, and he complains, this day became so short. Another person lives only for an hour in suspense and complains, oh God, the day has become so long. When will those wintry days come? Even in relation to real practical, what seems practical to human being, time, space. But all human beings don't experience time, space exactly the same. Neither anyone experiences in the morning your time, space awareness is different. With little more rajas, your time, space awareness will be different. So how you experience time, space, that's a different matter. So you have kind of a predicament of dream within a dream. Even what seems realistic time and space to all human beings, that in itself is Maya. Therefore, any person, any soul led by karma does not go into exact time space, because time space world is in itself not the reality. So therefore you can't keep a record that which soul was there which has come now. People do that, but that's unnecessary distraction. So, the Puryastaka of a person, the subtle body of a person, continues to project the world of time and space and enters into it wearing different bodies. Bodies are like garbs, grabbing the garb led by your karma, changing its bodily garbs through the process of repeated birth and deaths. Let this mental body be destroyed by spiritual knowledge. In the practice of sadhana, 3 steps are needed. Manonash, the mind that fabricates karmas. That mind, if it were not to waste its energy in raga and dvesha, attachment and hatred, the moment you allow the mind to become mature and not be shaken but not be torn down, then that type of mind is a successful mind. You have really used your mind. And that if you have reached that state, it's called manonash, because that mind will not create bondage. Rather, it will go on breaking your bondage. But go further up, Why? What influences your mind? Vasanas, subtle desires. So vasana kshaya, allow those types of subtle impressions to exist which are in harmony with your spiritual progress. Vasanas can be compared to cloud. Purifying the vasana is allowing the rays of the sun to go through the cloud. So as purification occurs, the rays are moving more and more in the cloud of your subtle desires. And now your subconscious becomes happier to allow that process to move on. You experience inner peace more and more. You enjoy it. And it is the basis of all generous understanding and broad heart and elegant feelings, Shubha Vasana. And when that reaches its climax, cloud has moved away, then what seemed to obstruct the sun, that's an imaginary veil, is not there. The sun shines. Manonash, Vasanakshaya, Tattva Gyan. Through death, a person becomes detached from his family, friends, near and dear relatives, and the realities of his life. That's a normal thing to understand, how all things that you have now, the world of yours, the moment you kick the bucket and get into another bucket, all this changes. So in each embodiment, the soul discovers different relationships and different set of realities. Death is merely a change in the scene, in the drama of life. But while all this goes on, the self, the innermost reality, that self remains ever the same. Just as a bird, after hatching out of an egg, flies into the sky, in the same way, O Rama, break the eggshell of illusion, remove the confines of the egoistic vision, and once you discover the wings of wisdom and bliss, soar into the infinite sky of freedom. And with this we will conclude. And prayer for health, long life, peace, prosperity and enlightenment for all. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukum Bandhanan Mrityor Mukshiyamamritat Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kashchid Dukha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Mritam Gamaya Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Hari Om.
Are there any questions for Swami Jay? If so, raise your hand, please. Swamiji, could you talk more
expound on the topic of, I think you called it a sankalpa for enlightenment?
Mm-hmm. Satsankalpa is your will. How strong is your will for a project? If you have will to become a professor, that's called sankalpa. But it is not, it's a relative satsankalpa. Real satsankalpa is if your will is for the highest goal. But how can that satsankalpa become perfect unless the highest goal is understood by your mind? The more you understand it, this sankalpa begins to become more and more sat-oriented. And therefore you figure it out, what level of satsanga. If satsankalpa becomes absolute, then you are like Bhishma. Live your life in a profound way, you are going to attain enlightenment.
Gurudev. Gurudev, you had mentioned that one of the princes, two other princes were not born and one was not conceived.
Fortunately, you didn't hear the whole thing.
Does that talk about the unborn nature, your unborn nature?
No, all that it means that anything that is happening in your dream, it has a series of causation. But in every step in your dream, it is not a real thing. But your mind doesn't care, it simply moves on. Your whole personality is involved in a dream. So you are being given to understand that you are facing layers and layers of illusion. First set of illusion, that the world is under Ishvara, God, who controls the world. If the world doesn't exist, Brahman doesn't have to play the part of Ishvara. And Ishvara, that's the one who was never born. And Jiva, individual soul. And similarly, they have brought out a whole story. Jiva is not even conceived. Ishvara, Jiva, Brahma, all these are they seem to be important when you study why the world came about and all the role of the world. Similarly, the three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, the gunas themselves, through the mind you are splitting up cosmic energy. That again, cosmic, I am speaking allegorically, you are splitting up Brahman into three processes of energy through your mind. All these three streams, rivers, two have no waters. A third has no basis. But that's the way world goes on. And the child remains completely entertained. How wonderful. What happens next? And they find there are many things, there are many entertaining things. They find a tree, 3 trees. 2 were never germinated. And third somehow came to exist. Under the third, they all relax. And so they go on making that illusion story that's entertaining, so much so that when they are hungry, they receive. They gather rice. How much they gather? 99 minus 100. And having cooked the rice, they invite 3 guests. Because first to feed the guests, then we eat yours. 2 of the guests have no bodies. Third guest has no mouth. But they all enjoyed the feast you gave. It's a blunt description of illusion. And that illusion goes on in daily life. You see. People who are unhealthy and somehow addicted to something, though they are harming themselves, and yet they go on enjoying. And not only they enjoy, they got only minus food, but they share it with others. And coming to more broader way, all that you attain through your karmas, they are not your attainment at all. It doesn't require my any further explanation. Okay.
Let me one quick question. The dream state, the things that happen in the dream state, are they also driven by karmic activity, just like
Yes.
in the daytime?
Yes. Karma, as karma is being worked out, some karmas are mature. They work out in your waking state as practical reality. Some karmas are immature, and they work out in your dream. If you are doing sadhana, some strong karmas that would have worked in waking state, they diminish. But they don't diminish completely. They could diminish, all depends. But if they don't diminish completely, the day you have done wonderful meditation, you find a horrible dream. In your mind, you blame the meditation. But the reality is, your meditation will reduce the power of your karma. The karma that could have broken your car in waking state, brought tragic situation. It did more horrible situation in your dream. But you woke up unaffected. But karma operates in mysterious way.